For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had cataloged every vessel, every species, every speck of dust that dared traverse their domain. Their quantum archives contained the blueprint of existence itself, or so they believed. But today, Admiral HFY of the Imperial Fleet stared at his tactical display with 4 eyes wide in disbelief. A ship approached their border station, sleek, primitive, utterly alien. No energy signatures in their databases, no hull composition matches, no design philosophy that fit any known civilization. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, tentacles trembling, "it's transmitting something." A simple mathematical sequence, then music. The Admiral's scales rippled with unease. In all his centuries of service, nothing had ever appeared in their space without their knowledge. Nothing had ever made them question the completeness of their empire. The vessel wasn't just approaching rapidly, it was approaching with the confidence of a species that had never heard the word impossible. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity was about to introduce themselves to a galaxy that thought it knew everything. What happens when an empire that has never been surprised meets a species that specializes in the impossible? The massive command center of Border Station Nexus 7 hummed with the quiet efficiency of 3 millennia of imperial dominance. Admiral HFY moved between the monitoring stations with practiced grace, his 4 arms coordinating data streams from across 17 star systems. The Caltharian's scaled hide reflected the soft blue glow of holographic displays that showed every registered vessel within 1,000 light-years. "Status report!" he commanded, his dual vocal cords producing the harmonic authority that had earned him command of the Empire's most strategic border station. Lieutenant Vex Mori, a young Silthon whose translucent skin pulsed with nervous energy, approached with his daily briefing. "Admiral, all shipping lanes are operating within normal parameters." The Taraxian merchant fleet completed their inspection protocols 3 hours ahead of schedule. No anomalies detected in sectors 7 through 12. HFY nodded approvingly. Nexus 7 served as the gateway between the Empire's core worlds and the Outer Rim territories. Every ship, every cargo pod, every communication drone that passed through this checkpoint was cataloged, analyzed, and cross-referenced with the Imperial archives. The system was perfect because it had to be. The Empire's strength lay not just in their military might, but in their absolute knowledge of everything that existed within their domain. "Sir?" Communications Officer Jex Laura's 6 tentacles writhed with confusion as she manipulated her quantum relay console. "I'm detecting something unusual." In 300 years of service, he had heard those words perhaps twice. Define unusual. Long-range sensors have detected an approaching vessel. Distance approximately 57 light hours and closing. "But sir," her voice trailed off as she double-checked her readings. "It's not in our archives." A profound silence fell over the command center. Every technician, every analyst, every junior officer turned to stare at the communication station. The concept of an unregistered vessel was so fundamentally impossible that the translation protocols in their universal communicators struggled to process the words. "Run the scan again," HFY ordered, his scales darkening with the first stirrings of concern he had felt in decades. Jex Laura's tentacles danced across her controls with desperate precision. "Confirmed, Admiral." The vessel's energy signature, hull composition, and design architecture match nothing in our databases. It appears to be constructed from materials we don't recognize, using technology that defies classification. Chief Analyst Kex Vaughn, an ancient Morphean whose crystalline body had witnessed the rise and fall of minor civilizations, slowly turned from his archaeological research station.
"Admiral, in my 4,000 years of service to the Empire, I have cataloged over 2 million distinct spacecraft designs."
Every known species has been documented, analyzed, and integrated into our understanding of galactic civilization. What Officer Jex Laura describes is impossible. HFY approached the main tactical display, his 4 hands activating the station's most advanced sensors. The holographic representation of local space materialized before him, showing the familiar patterns of trade routes, patrol ships, and orbital installations. And there, at the very edge of sensor range, was a single blinking icon that should not exist. "Magnify sector designation Theta 97, he commanded. The display shifted, focusing on the approaching anomaly. The vessel appeared as little more than a sensor shadow at this distance, but even the preliminary data was disturbing. Its trajectory was perfectly straight, showing none of the course corrections that characterized faster-than-light travel through known space lanes. Its speed was constant, neither accelerating nor decelerating as it approached Imperial territory. "Sir," Tactical Officer Quexthon announced from his position near the weapons systems console, "the vessel is not responding to standard identification queries. Our automated beacon systems have transmitted first contact protocols in all registered languages, but there has been no acknowledgement." "Have you attempted emergency frequency broadcasts?" Zexthai asked, though he suspected the answer. "All frequencies, Admiral, including the ancient ceremonial channels used for diplomatic contact with primitive species." Complete silence. The Admiral's secondary eyes focused on the tactical data, while his primary eyes studied the approaching vessel. Everything about the situation violated the fundamental principles that governed galactic civilization. Ships didn't appear from nowhere. Species didn't remain hidden from Imperial surveillance. And most importantly, nothing approached a border station without announcing its intentions. "Alert command authority," he decided. "Inform them that we have encountered what appears to be a first contact scenario." First contact was something that happened to exploration vessels in the Outer Rim, not to border stations in civilized space. The last authenticated first contact event had occurred over 800 years ago, when the Empire discovered a pre-industrial species on the far edge of the galaxy. As his communications officer transmitted the alert, Zexthai found himself studying the mysterious vessel's approach vector. The ship seemed to be following a direct course toward Nexus 7, showing an understanding of their location and significance that should have been impossible for an unknown species. "Admiral," Jexlora called out, her voice tight with confusion, "the vessel is transmitting something." "Not exactly, sir. It's broadcasting a series of mathematical sequences, followed by what appears to be acoustic patterns of some kind." Zexthai activated the communication relay, the bridge filled with a series of precise mathematical progressions, clearly artificial in origin. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, geometric proofs, standard first contact mathematics that every civilized species used to establish basic communication. Then the transmission shifted to something entirely different. Sound filled the command center, unlike anything in the Imperial archives. It was rhythmic yet chaotic, structured yet emotional. The acoustic patterns seemed to follow rules that defied logical analysis, rising and falling in ways that triggered unexpected responses in the listening officers.
"What is this?" breathed Chief Analyst Kexvern, his crystalline form resonating sympathetically with the strange sounds.
"Unknown," Jexlora replied, her tentacles unconsciously swaying to the alien rhythm. "Our linguistic analysis systems cannot classify these patterns. They appear to serve no informational purpose, yet they clearly represent some form of organized expression." The transmission continued for several minutes before returning to mathematical sequences, then repeating the pattern. Mathematics, strange sounds, mathematics again. "They're trying to establish communication protocols," Zexthai realized. "The mathematical sequences prove intelligence and establish common ground. The other sounds must serve some cultural or social function we don't understand." "Should we respond, sir?" The Admiral considered carefully. Protocol demanded that all first contact situations be handled by specially trained diplomatic corps with full cultural analysis support. But the vessel was approaching rapidly, and command authority was still 12 hours away from deployment. "Transmit standard first contact mathematics," he ordered. "Follow with basic pictographic symbols representing our location and peaceful intentions." As the response was transmitted, Zexthai watched the tactical display with growing unease. The unknown vessel maintained its steady approach, now close enough for detailed sensor analysis. What he saw challenged everything he thought he understood about spacecraft design. The ship was relatively small, perhaps 300 meters in length. Its hull appeared to be constructed from refined metallic alloys that showed signs of incredible precision manufacturing. But the most disturbing aspect was its design philosophy. Every Imperial vessel, from the smallest courier to the massive dreadnoughts, followed established engineering principles that had been refined over millennia. This vessel looked like it had been designed by minds that had never seen another spacecraft. "Sir," Tactical Officer Krexthon announced with growing alarm, "the vessel is not following any known faster-than-light travel pattern. Our sensors detect no dimensional displacement, no temporal distortion, no exotic matter manipulation. Yet it's maintaining a speed that should be impossible without those technologies." Explain. "According to our readings, the vessel is traveling at approximately 70% of light speed using what appears to be conventional propulsion. No species achieves those velocities without dimensional manipulation technology." Zexathai's scales rippled with the electric sensation that preceded true fear. Conventional physics made faster-than-light travel prohibitively expensive in terms of energy and time. Every civilized species used dimensional shortcuts to traverse galactic distances. A species that could achieve near-light speeds through conventional means implied technological development along completely different lines than anything in Imperial experience. "Time to intercept?" he asked. "At current velocity, the vessel will reach our position in approximately 4 hours. "And still no response to our transmissions?" "None, sir." But Jexlora paused, checking her readings. "The mathematical sequences in their transmission have changed. They're now broadcasting more complex proofs, including some that I don't recognize." Chief Analyst Kex Veron moved to the communications station, his ancient mind working through the implications. "Admiral, these mathematical concepts, some of them appear to be solutions to theoretical problems that our greatest minds have been working on for centuries. If this species has developed mathematics beyond our current understanding, advanced mathematics meant advanced science. Advanced science meant advanced technology. And advanced technology in the hands of an unknown species approaching Imperial space represented a potential threat that the Empire had never had to consider. "Weapons status?" Zexthai inquired. "All defensive systems are operational, Admiral. But, sir, our tactical analysis subroutines cannot generate threat assessments for unknown technology. We have no baseline for comparison." The Admiral activated his command authorization protocols and opened a direct channel to Imperial Command. The face of Supreme Admiral Tex Kalar appeared on his personal communication screen, the Voltarian's electric blue skin crackling with the energy patterns that indicated high-level concern. "Admiral Zexthai," the Supreme Admiral's voice carried the authority of the Imperial throne itself. "We have received your alert. Explain the situation." "Sir, we have an unregistered vessel approaching Nexus. 7. The ship does not appear in our archives, uses unknown propulsion technology, and broadcasts mathematical concepts that exceed our current understanding. First contact protocols are in effect, but the species has not responded to our communication attempts." Supreme Admiral Texkalar's skin patterns shifted to the deeper blues that indicated serious contemplation. "Admiral, are you certain this vessel is not some classified Imperial project that has been omitted from station records? I've cross-referenced every Black Project designation in our systems. This vessel represents technology and design philosophy that exists nowhere in Imperial space. Time frame? 4 hours until intercept at current velocity." The Supreme Admiral's image flickered as he consulted with advisors outside the communication frame. When he returned his attention to the screen, his expression had hardened into the patterns that preceded major military deployments. "Admiral Zexthai, you are hereby authorized to implement Contact Protocol 7. A full diplomatic and military response team is being dispatched to your position, but they will not arrive for 18 standard hours. Until then, you are to maintain defensive posture and gather as much intelligence as possible without provoking hostile action." "Understood, sir." "Admiral," the Supreme Admiral's voice carried a warning that chilled Zexthai's blood. "In 3,000 years, nothing has surprised the Empire. The fact that something has now done so means we are entering uncharted territory. Exercise extreme caution." The connection terminated, leaving Zexthai alone with his staff and an impossible situation. He looked around the command center, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in every face, every tentacle, every scale pattern. They were the Empire's elite, trained to handle any conceivable scenario. But no one had conceived of this. "Continue monitoring the vessel's approach," he ordered. "I want constant updates on any changes in trajectory, velocity, or communication patterns. And someone get me a complete analysis of those mathematical transmissions. If this species has scientific knowledge that surpasses ours, I need to know what we might be dealing with." As his crew returned to their tasks, Admiral Zexthai remained at the tactical display, watching the impossible ship draw closer to his station. Somewhere out there, representatives of an unknown species were approaching the edge of Imperial space with technology that challenged everything the Empire thought it knew about the galaxy. The next few hours would determine whether this encounter would become a footnote in Imperial history or the beginning of something that would change everything forever. The command center of Nexus 7 had transformed from a routine monitoring station into the most important location in the galaxy. Officers from across the station had been quietly reassigned to support the first contact operation, their usual duties handed off to automated systems. Admiral Zexthai stood before the main tactical display, watching the mysterious vessel continue its steady approach while teams of specialists analyzed every piece of data they could gather. Chief Analyst Kexvaran had not moved from the communication station in 3 hours. His crystalline body had taken on the deep amber coloration that indicated intense intellectual focus as he worked through the mathematical transmissions from the unknown ship. Occasionally, his form would pulse with brief flashes of silver, the Morphean equivalent of excitement or breakthrough moments. "Admiral," Kexvaran called out, his voice carrying harmonics that made nearby equipment resonate. "I need you to see this." Zexthai approached the analysis station where holographic equations floated in midair, constantly shifting and evolving as the ancient scholar worked through their implications. The mathematics looked familiar at first glance, following standard universal constants and logical progressions. But as the Admiral studied the displays more carefully, he began to notice subtle variations that sent chills through his nervous system. "These initial sequences are standard first contact protocols," Kexvaran explained, highlighting sections of the transmission with gestures that made the relevant equations glow brighter. "Prime numbers, mathematical constants, geometric proofs, nothing unusual, but then they do something extraordinary." The holographic display shifted to show a complex proof that seemed to fold in on itself, creating mathematical structures that hurt to look at directly. They've provided solutions to 3 different unified field theories that our best minds have been working on for over 800 years. Not approximations, Admiral. Complete, elegant solutions that I can verify are correct. "That's impossible," Zexthai said automatically. "The Empire's greatest mathematical minds collaborate across hundreds of worlds. No single species could surpass our collective knowledge. Yet they have." Kexvaran manipulated the display to show another series of equations. But it gets worse. These mathematical concepts they're transmitting suggest a fundamental understanding of space-time that we've only theorized about. If they can apply this knowledge practically, what kind of technological capabilities are we talking about? The crystalline scholar's form shifted to the deep purple that indicated profound concern. "Admiral, if these beings can manipulate space-time at the level their mathematics suggest, they could theoretically travel anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level. They could possibly even influence the flow of time itself." Communications Officer Jex Laura suddenly straightened at her station. All 6 tentacles focused on her displays with laser-like intensity. "Admiral, the vessel is transmitting again." The new transmission began with the same mathematical sequences as before, but then evolved into something entirely different. Instead of abstract proofs, the unknown ship was broadcasting detailed schematics. 3-dimensional technical diagrams filled the holographic displays, showing mechanical systems that followed no known engineering principles. "What are we looking at?" Zexthai demanded. Engineering specialist Bextora, a Quillan whose multiple manipulator arms allowed her to operate several analysis systems simultaneously, had joined the growing crowd around the communication station. Her compound eyes examined the schematics from dozens of different angles as her arms worked to decode the technical specifications. "These appear to be propulsion systems," she announced after several minutes of intense analysis. "But the design philosophy is completely alien. Instead of using dimensional manipulation to bypass normal space, they're showing us engines that work by manipulating the fundamental forces of physics directly. Explain in terms a military commander can understand." Zexthai ordered. "Imagine trying to cross a river," Baxtora said, her translator struggling to find appropriate analogies. "Our technology would fold space to bring the far shore to us. Their technology appears to convince the water that it doesn't want to be wet anymore." The Admiral stared at her. "That makes no sense." "Exactly, sir. But according to these schematics, it works. They're showing us engines that achieve faster-than-light travel by altering the basic constants of physics in localized areas around their vessel. Instead of going around the speed of light limit, they temporarily convince the universe that the speed of light is actually much higher." Tactical Officer Kexthon looked up from his sensor array with growing alarm. "Admiral, if they can manipulate fundamental constants, what does that mean for our weapon systems?" Before anyone could answer, Lieutenant Vex Mori burst into the command center carrying a data tablet that pulsed with urgent priority codes. "We've received a priority transmission from the Imperial Science Directorate. They want to know if we're actually receiving mathematical proofs that solve the Corthanian paradox." "The what?" Zexthai asked. Chief Analyst Kexveron's form flashed brilliant white with shock. "Admiral, the Corthanian paradox is a theoretical mathematics problem that has stumped our greatest minds for over 2,000 years. It's considered one of the fundamental unsolved mysteries of the universe. If these beings have solved it, they just transmitted the solution 15 minutes ago," Vex Mori reported, checking his tablet. "The Science Directorate's quantum computers have verified that the proof is not only correct, but elegant in ways that our best theorists never imagined." The command center fell silent except for the ambient hum of operating systems. Every officer present was struggling to process the implications of what they were hearing. An unknown species was approaching Imperial space with mathematical knowledge that surpassed the Empire's greatest achievements, and they were casually broadcasting solutions to problems that had challenged civilization for millennia. "Sir," Communications Officer Jex Laura announced quietly, "the vessel has begun transmitting what appears to be star charts." "Show me." The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of local space. But this wasn't the familiar territory that Imperial cartographers had mapped over centuries of exploration. This map showed stellar formations extending far beyond the Empire's borders, including regions of space that had never been explored. "How detailed are these charts?" Zexthon asked. "Complete stellar positions, planetary data, resource distributions, even gravitational anomaly patterns," Jex Laura replied, her tentacles trembling with the magnitude of what she was reporting. "Admiral, these charts show accurate data for star systems that our long-range exploration teams haven't even reached yet. They're showing us that they know more about our own galaxy than we do," Zexthai realized with growing dread. Engineering specialist Baxtora had been quietly analyzing the propulsion schematics while the others discussed the star charts. Now she looked up with an expression that made the Admiral's scales darken with foreboding. "Sir, I've been calculating the energy requirements for the propulsion systems they've shown us. If my analysis is correct, their ship should be capable of accelerating to near light speed almost instantaneously, with no apparent energy limitations. What kind of power source would be required for that?" "That's just it, sir. The schematics don't show a power source. The engines appear to draw energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. They're harvesting power from the empty space between atoms." Chief Analyst Keck's version's crystalline form pulsed with rapid color changes as he processed this information alongside the mathematical proofs he had been studying. "Admiral, if they can tap directly into quantum energy states, their technological capabilities are essentially unlimited. They could power entire civilizations with technology no larger than our personal communication devices." Admiral Zexthai felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. Everything his crew was telling him pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Somewhere in the galaxy, a species had developed along technological lines that the Empire had never imagined, achieving capabilities that bordered on what lesser civilizations might consider godlike powers. "Time to intercept?" he asked, though he was no longer certain he wanted to know the answer. 2 hours, 17 minutes, Tactical Officer Kexthon reported. "Admiral, the vessel has maintained perfect trajectory and velocity throughout our observation period. No course corrections, no speed adjustments. It's approaching our station with the precision of a guided weapon. Have we received any response to our communication attempts?" "None, sir. But the mathematical and technical transmissions continue. They seem to be providing us with increasingly advanced information, as if they're trying to educate us about their capabilities." Communications Officer Jex Laura suddenly stiffened at her station. "Admiral, new transmission incoming. This one is different." The holographic displays filled with something that defied immediate classification. It wasn't mathematics, wasn't technical schematics, wasn't star charts. Instead, the transmission seemed to contain organized patterns of information that followed structures the Imperial computers couldn't recognize. "What are we looking at?" Zexthai demanded. "I'm not sure, sir. The patterns appear to be some form of cultural information. Art, perhaps, or historical records? The organizing principles are completely foreign to our analysis systems." Chief Analyst Kex Verdon approached the display with the careful movements of someone approaching something potentially dangerous. As he began to study the strange patterns, his crystalline body started resonating with frequencies that made the entire command center hum softly. "This is not random information," he announced after several minutes of intense focus. "These patterns follow mathematical rules, but they're applied to represent something beyond pure data. If I had to guess, I would say we're looking at cultural expression translated into mathematical form." "They're showing us their art?" Lieutenant Vexmori asked incredulously. "More than that," Kexavaran replied, his voice taking on the harmonic undertones that indicated deep revelation. "They're showing us how they think. These patterns reveal cognitive processes that are fundamentally different from any known species. They don't just solve problems differently than we do. They perceive reality itself in ways we can't comprehend." Admiral Zexthai studied the alien patterns with growing unease. First contact protocols assumed that all intelligent species would follow roughly similar developmental patterns. Mathematical principles were universal, scientific methods were consistent, and technological advancement followed logical progressions. But everything about this mysterious vessel suggested that these assumptions were dangerously wrong. "Sir," Tactical Officer Kexthon called out urgently, "I'm detecting energy emissions from the approaching vessel." "But the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. The vessel appears to be scanning our station with some form of exotic particles that pass through our shields as if they weren't there, meaning they're getting detailed information about our defensive capabilities, our personnel, and our technology," Zexthai concluded grimly. "It gets worse, Admiral. The scanning particles are interacting with our computer systems at the quantum level. They're not just gathering information, they're reading our databases directly." The implications hit the Admiral like a physical blow. The unknown vessel wasn't just approaching their station, it was conducting a complete intelligence-gathering operation that bypassed every security measure the Empire had developed over 3 millennia. In less than 4 hours, these beings would know more about Imperial technology and capabilities than most Imperial citizens. "I don't see how, sir. The particles they're using don't interact with normal matter in ways our defensive systems can intercept. It's as if they're scanning us from a parallel dimension." Chief Analyst Kex Vern looked up from his study of the cultural patterns with an expression that made everyone in the command center focus their attention on him. "Admiral, I believe I understand what we're dealing with." They represent an entirely different approach to understanding and manipulating reality. Where we use technology to work around the limitations of physics, they appear to have developed ways to rewrite those limitations entirely. They're not just more advanced than us, they're operating according to completely different rules. What does that mean for our defensive posture? The ancient scholar's crystalline form darkened to the deep purple that indicated profound concern. "Admiral, If my analysis is correct, the concept of defense may be meaningless against these beings. They appear to exist partially outside normal space-time, which means our weapons might not be able to target them effectively, and their scanning capabilities suggest they understand our technology better than we do. Admiral Zexthai looked around the command center, seeing his own fear reflected in every face, every tentacle, every scale pattern. His crew represented the best the Empire had to offer, trained and equipped with the most advanced technology known to galactic civilization. But everything they were learning about the approaching vessel suggested that they were as helpless as primitives facing forces beyond their comprehension. Communications, he ordered. Transmit a message on all frequencies. Standard diplomatic protocols, request identification, statement of intentions, and formal communication establishment. Sir, Jexlora replied hesitantly, we've been attempting to establish communications for hours. They haven't responded to any of our transmissions. Use the mathematical sequences they've been broadcasting. Mirror their communication style back to them. As his communications officer worked to establish contact, Admiral Zexthai activated his personal command interface and began composing an updated report for Imperial Command. How could he explain that the Empire's fundamental assumptions about technology, physics, and the nature of reality itself were being challenged by beings who seemed to treat the impossible as routine? The mysterious vessel continued its steady approach, broadcasting mathematical proofs that solved millennium-old problems, technical schematics that defied understanding, and cultural patterns that suggested minds operating according to alien logic. And somewhere aboard that ship, representatives of an unknown species were preparing to make contact with an empire that was beginning to realize it might not be as advanced as it had always believed. In less than 2 hours, everything would change. The tension in Nexus 7's command center had reached levels that Admiral Zexthai had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service. Every display showed readings that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible, while his crew struggled to maintain professional composure in the face of the impossible. The mysterious vessel now appeared on their short-range sensors with crystal clarity, and what they saw defied every principle of spacecraft engineering. The ship's hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, constantly reconfiguring its surface patterns in ways that suggested the boundary between the vessel and empty space wasn't entirely fixed. Energy readings fluctuated wildly, sometimes showing power levels that exceeded the station's entire reactor output, other times dropping to barely detectable levels. Admiral, engineering specialist Bextora called out, her multiple arms working frantically across several analysis stations. The vessel's hull composition is changing in real time. It's not constructed from any fixed materials. The entire ship appears to be made from programmable matter that can reconfigure itself at will. Programmable matter? Lieutenant Bexmore asked, his translation implants struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Imperial science. The ship is essentially a liquid that has chosen to be solid, Bextora explained, her compound eyes reflecting the strain of analyzing technology that shouldn't exist. But it can become anything it needs to be. Weapon, tool, shelter, manufacturing facility. The distinction between the vessel and its crew may be meaningless. Communications Officer Jexlora suddenly straightened at her station, all 6 tentacles focused with laser-like intensity on her displays. Admiral, we're receiving a new transmission, but this one is different. It's not mathematics or technical data. Put it through, Zexthai ordered. The command center's speakers crackled to life with something that sent chills through every officer present. It was a voice, unmistakably biological, speaking in perfectly clear Imperial Standard language. Nexus 7 Border Station. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We apologize for not responding to your earlier communications, but we needed time to analyze your language patterns and cultural protocols. We come in peace and request permission to approach for diplomatic contact. The absolute silence that followed this transmission lasted for nearly 30 seconds. Every being in the command center stared at the speakers as if they had just heard the voice of the universe itself. Did they just? Tactical Officer Quexthon began, then stopped, unable to finish the question. They learned our language, Chief Analyst Kexvern whispered, his crystalline form flashing rapid patterns of silver and gold. In 4 hours of passive observation, they decoded not just our linguistic structures, but our cultural communication protocols. Admiral Zextai felt his scales ripple with the electric sensation that preceded moments of profound change. Everything about this situation had already shattered Imperial assumptions, but hearing the aliens speak their language with perfect fluency drove home the magnitude of what they were dealing with. "Respond," he ordered. Standard diplomatic acknowledgement. Jex Laura activated the transmission array. Earth Vessel Prometheus. This is Admiral Zextai of the Imperial Border Station Nexus. Nexus, welcome to Imperial space. We acknowledge your peaceful intentions and are prepared to facilitate diplomatic contact. However, we must inform you that your vessel is not registered in our archives, and your approach has triggered first contact protocols. The response came immediately. Admiral Zextai, we understand your concern. Earth is indeed a new contact for your empire. We are humans from a star system approximately 57 light-years from your current position. We've been aware of your civilization for some time through long-range observation, but this represents our first direct contact attempt. Past 57 light-years, engineering specialist Bextora muttered, checking her calculations.
Admiral, at the velocity we observed, they would have required over 80 years to travel that distance.
But the vessel shows no signs of being a multi-generational ship. Captain Chen's voice continued through the speakers. We realize our arrival may seem sudden, but we've been observing galactic civilization for several decades while developing technologies that would allow us to participate as equals rather than as primitives seeking protection. As equals? Chief Analyst Kexvern's harmonic voice carried undertones of incredulous disbelief. Admiral, they're positioning themselves as peers to an empire that spans thousands of star systems. However, Imperial protocols require that first contact situations be handled by specialized diplomatic teams. We have contacted our central authority, and representatives will arrive within the next 14 hours to facilitate formal contact procedures. There was a brief pause before the human captain replied. Admiral, we understand your protocols, but we should inform you that time may be a factor. Our deep space sensors have detected signs of trouble developing in several sectors of your empire. We believe our technologies might be able to help address some critical challenges your civilization is facing. Admiral Zextai exchanged glances with his senior staff. The Imperial military's intelligence networks were the most sophisticated in the galaxy, with monitoring stations and sensor arrays covering every significant sector. The idea that an unknown species could detect problems that Imperial intelligence had missed was deeply disturbing. What kind of problems, he asked, despite knowing he was moving beyond established protocols. Your Outer Rim territories are experiencing what appears to be coordinated attacks by an unknown hostile force, Captain Chen replied. Our long-range sensors show signs of massive energy discharges and debris fields in at least 17 different systems. The attack pattern suggests a level of coordination that implies either a previously undetected species or the emergence of a significant new threat. Tactical Officer Kexthon frantically activated his intelligence feeds, accessing secure military channels that required his highest security clearances. His face showed growing alarm as he processed the incoming data. Admiral, he reported quietly, I'm detecting priority military traffic on secure channels. Multiple Outer Rim stations have gone dark in the last 6 hours. High Command is implementing emergency response protocols. How could they know this before we did? Lieutenant Vexmori asked. Captain Chen's voice carried a note of sympathy that was somehow more unsettling than direct challenge would have been. Our sensor technology operates on principles that allow us to monitor galactic events in real time regardless of distance. We've been tracking these attacks as they developed and hope to offer assistance before the situation became critical. Chief Analyst Kexavaran approached the Admiral with data tablets showing rapid calculations. Sir, if they can monitor events across the galaxy instantaneously, they've solved the fundamental problem of faster-than-light information transmission. That technology alone would revolutionize every aspect of Imperial science and military operations. Captain Chen, Admiral Zexthay said, fighting to maintain diplomatic protocols while grappling with information that changed everything. What kind of assistance are you referring to?
Admiral, we understand this situation is unprecedented.
Would you be willing to accept a small diplomatic team aboard your station? Face-to-face communication might be more efficient for discussing the complexities of the current situation. The request sent alarm signals through every Imperial officer's training. Allowing unknown aliens aboard a strategic military facility violated fundamental security protocols. But the developing crisis in the Outer Rim, combined with the humans' apparent advanced knowledge of the situation, created circumstances that no protocol had anticipated. Captain Chen, I must consult with my command authority before approving physical contact. Can you maintain your current position while we establish communication with our central command? Of course, Admiral. However, I should mention that our sensors indicate the hostile force responsible for the Outer Rim attacks is moving toward core Imperial territory. Based on their current advancement rate, you may have less than 48 hours before they reach sectors that contain major population centers. The warning hit the command center like a physical shockwave. Admiral Zexthay immediately activated emergency command protocols, establishing priority communications with Supreme Admiral Tex Kalar and the Imperial High Command. The Supreme Admiral's image appeared on the main display within minutes, his electric blue skin patterns showing the deep crimson colorations that indicated maximum military alert status. Admiral Zexthay, Supreme Admiral Tex Kalar's voice carried the authority of someone making decisions that would affect billions of lives. We have confirmed hostile action in 17 Outer Rim sectors. Unknown forces using unidentifiable technology have destroyed or captured multiple Imperial installations. We need every available resource focused on threat assessment and response preparation. Sir, the human vessel has offered assistance. They claim to have been monitoring the situation and possess technologies that might help address the crisis. Humans? The Supreme Admiral's skin patterns shifted to deep purple confusion. Admiral, this is not the time for first contact procedures. We're facing the first major threat to Imperial security in over 8 centuries. Sir, I believe the two situations may be connected. The humans arrived with advanced knowledge of the attacks before our own intelligence networks detected them. Their technological capabilities appear to exceed our understanding in several critical areas. Supreme Admiral Tex Kalar was silent for nearly a minute, clearly conferring with advisors outside the communication frame. When he returned his attention to the screen, his expression showed the grim determination of someone making decisions that could determine the fate of civilization. Admiral Zexthay, you are authorized to establish limited contact with these humans under Emergency Protocol 12. If they possess intelligence or capabilities that could help address the current crisis, we need that information immediately, but maintain maximum security precautions. Understood, sir. Adverse says that it's the communication ended. Admiral Zexthay turned to address his crew. All departments implement Emergency Protocol 12. We're going to allow a limited diplomatic team aboard the station. Communications Officer Jex Laura opened the channel to the human vessel. Captain Chen, we are prepared to receive a small diplomatic team. However, they will be subject to standard security screening and must limit themselves to designated areas of the station. Thank you, Admiral. We'll dispatch a team of 3 representatives. They should arrive at your docking bay in approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Engineering Specialist Bextora looked up from her displays in confusion. Admiral, they're still over an hour away at their current velocity. Captain Chen's voice carried what sounded like amusement. We're using a short-range transport that operates on different principles than our main vessel. Our diplomatic team will arrive via instantaneous spatial translation. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the station's sensors detected an energy anomaly forming in their primary docking bay. Lieutenant Bexmori rushed to the bay's monitoring station and activated the visual displays. Admiral, he called out in amazement, There's something materializing in Docking Bay 7. The holographic display showed space itself seeming to fold and twist in the center of the docking bay. Reality rippled like water, and then three figures stepped through what could only be described as a tear in the fabric of space-time itself. They just teleported directly onto our station, Tactical Officer Kexthon said in a voice that suggested his worldview was rapidly crumbling. The three humans stood in the docking bay looking around with what appeared to be casual interest. They wore simple uniforms that seemed to shift color and texture as they moved, and they carried no visible equipment or weapons. Most disturbing of all, they appeared completely human, matching biological patterns that Imperial xenobiologists insisted could not possibly evolve independently on different worlds. "Admiral," Captain Chen's voice came through the speakers, "our diplomatic team has arrived. Dr. Japid, Elena Rodriguez, our xenobiological specialist, Commander Jack Mitchell, our military liaison, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, our technology integration advisor. They're prepared to discuss how we might assist with the current crisis." Admiral Zexthai looked around his command center at officers whose expressions ranged from wonder to terror. In the space of a few hours, every assumption about imperial superiority, technological advancement, and the nature of the galaxy itself had been systematically demolished by beings who claimed to come in peace but demonstrated capabilities that bordered on the godlike. "Escort our guests to Conference Room Alpha," he ordered, "and activate full security monitoring. We're about to learn whether the galaxy just became a much larger place or whether we've been living in a much smaller one than we realized." As security teams moved to escort the human diplomatic team, Admiral Zexthai couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of the current crisis, but the future of Imperial civilization itself. Conference Room Alpha aboard Nexus 7 had been designed to accommodate the physiological needs of dozens of different species, with adjustable atmospheric controls, variable gravity fields, and translation systems capable of handling the most complex interspecies communications. But as Admiral Zexthai entered the chamber to meet with the human diplomatic team, he realized that no amount of preparation could have adequately prepared him for this moment. The three humans sat around the conference table with a casual ease that somehow made them more unsettling than if they had displayed obvious signs of tension or unfamiliarity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, was examining a holographic display of the station's atmospheric composition with what appeared to be academic curiosity. Commander Jack Mitchell, a tall man with military bearing, had positioned himself where he could observe all entrances to the room while maintaining a relaxed posture. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a petite woman whose hands moved in subtle gestures that seemed to interact with invisible interfaces, was apparently accessing data streams that the Imperial sensors couldn't detect. "Admiral Zexthai," Dr. Rodriguez said, rising from her chair with fluid grace, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us under such challenging circumstances. We understand that our arrival has created significant complications for your protocols." The Admiral took his seat across from the human team, flanked by Chief Analyst Keksevran and Communications Officer Jex Laura. The translation systems remained active despite the humans' apparent fluency in Imperial Standard, creating an odd doubling effect as the universal translators attempted to process languages that were already being communicated clearly. "Rodriguez," Zexthai began carefully, "before we discuss the current crisis, I must ask some questions about your people and your capabilities. The technologies you've demonstrated challenge our understanding of what's possible within known physical laws." Commander Mitchell leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but not hostile. "Admiral, we appreciate your directness. Humans have always believed that understanding comes through honest communication. What specifically would you like to know?" Chief Analyst Keksebron activated his personal interface, projecting holographic equations into the center of the table. "Your vessel transmitted solutions to mathematical problems that have challenged our greatest minds for centuries. How is this possible for a species we've never encountered?" Tanaka smiled, her fingers still moving through invisible interfaces. Your mathematics are elegant, but they're based on assumptions about the nature of reality that we discovered were incomplete. When you assume that consciousness and physical reality are separate phenomena, certain problems become unsolvable. When you recognize that consciousness is fundamental to the structure of the universe itself, those same problems become trivial. That's impossible, Kexavarn replied automatically. Consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural networks. It cannot influence physical constants. On the contrary, Dr. Rodriguez said gently, consciousness is the medium through which physical constants express themselves. Your species, like most others in this galaxy, developed technology by manipulating matter and energy. We developed technology by learning to collaborate with the underlying consciousness that gives matter and energy their structure. Admiral Zexthai felt his scales ripple with the electric sensation that preceded profound confusion. You're saying you communicate with the universe itself? We're saying that the universe is communicative by nature, Dr. Tanaka replied. What you call physical laws are actually preferences that consciousness has developed over billions of years. Once you learn the language, you can participate in the conversation. Communications Officer Jex Laura's tentacles writhed with the agitation that indicated cognitive overload. If what you're saying is true, then everything we understand about science, technology, and the nature of reality is fundamentally wrong. Commander Mitchell's expression softened with what might have been sympathy. Not wrong, just incomplete. Your species has developed impressive technologies within the constraints you believe to exist. Humans simply learned to question whether those constraints were as absolute as they appeared. How? Admiral Zexthai demanded. How does a species develop along such radically different lines? Dr. Rodriguez exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. Admiral, Earth is unusual in ways that may not be immediately apparent. Our planet exists at the intersection of several dimensional boundaries, which means consciousness on Earth developed differently than in normal space. Humans evolved not just as biological entities, but as beings capable of perceiving and interacting with multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Multiple layers of reality, Kexavarn repeated slowly. You're describing parallel dimensions. Not parallel, Dr. Tanaka corrected. Interpenetrating. Reality isn't a single layer, it's more like a symphony with multiple instruments playing simultaneously. Most species can only hear one instrument at a time. Humans learn to hear the entire orchestra. The implications of what the humans were describing sent chills through every Imperial officer present. If consciousness could influence physical reality, if the universe itself was somehow aware and responsive, then every assumption about the nature of existence was potentially wrong. This brings us to the current crisis, Commander Mitchell said, his tone becoming more serious. The hostile force attacking your Outer Rim territories isn't from this galaxy. They're from a region of space where consciousness developed along very different lines. Admiral Zexthai leaned forward. Explain. Dr. Rodriguez activated what appeared to be her own holographic interface, though the Imperial sensors detected no technological devices. The air above the conference table filled with a three-dimensional map showing galactic structure in ways the Admiral had never seen before. What you perceive as the Milky Way galaxy is actually part of a much larger structure, she began. There are regions of space where consciousness developed not as cooperative entities seeking understanding, but as predatory forces seeking dominance and consumption. Jex Laura asked. They call themselves the Devourers, Dr. Tanaka replied. They've consumed hundreds of galaxies over millions of years by converting all consciousness within those galaxies into extensions of their collective will. They don't just conquer civilizations, they absorb them. How do you know this? Chief Analyst Kexavarn demanded. Commander Mitchell's expression became grim. Because they've tried to consume Earth. Multiple times. We've been fighting them for over 2 centuries. The statement hit the conference room like a physical blow. Admiral Zexthai struggled to process the implications of what he was hearing. You're telling me that Earth has been under attack by galaxy-consuming entities for 200 years? Not just under attack, Dr. Rodriguez corrected. We've been winning. Each time they've attempted to consume Earth, we've learned more about their capabilities and developed better defenses. Eventually, we realized that the best defense was to help other species develop similar capabilities before the Devourers reached them. That's why you're here, the Admiral realized. You're not making first contact. You're recruiting allies, Tanaka said carefully. The Devourers are systematic in their approach. They send scouts to identify the most advanced civilizations in each galaxy, then use those civilizations' own technologies against them. Your Empire's vast communication networks and manufacturing capabilities would be perfect tools for galactic conquest if they fell under Devourer control. Communications Officer Jex Laura's tentacles had gone rigid with fear. How long do we have? Based on their current advancement rate through your outer territories, the main Devourer fleet will reach your core worlds within 36 hours. But Admiral, you need to understand something important. Traditional military responses are not just ineffective against the Devourers, they actually make things worse. Explain. Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression intense. The Devourers feed on conflict, fear, and desperation. Every ship you send against them, every weapon you fire, every act of violence committed in response to their attacks makes them stronger. They're not just conquering your territories, they're consuming the consciousness of everyone who opposes them and adding that consciousness to their collective power. Admiral Zexthai felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a crushing burden. Everything the humans were telling him suggested that the Empire's entire military doctrine was not just useless but counterproductive against this threat. Then how do we fight them? You don't fight them, Dr. Tanaka replied. You transcend them. The Devourers can only consume consciousness that operates within the limitations they understand. When consciousness learns to operate beyond those limitations, it becomes indigestible. You're talking about transforming our entire civilization, Chief Analyst Kexavron said, his crystalline form pulsing with rapid color changes that indicated extreme cognitive stress. We're talking about awakening your civilization to capabilities it already possesses, Commander Mitchell corrected. Every species in your empire has the potential for consciousness-based reality manipulation. They just need to learn how to access those capabilities. In 36 hours? Admiral Zexthai asked incredulously. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, her expression showed genuine optimism. Admiral, we didn't come here just to warn you. We came here to offer you the tools for immediate consciousness expansion. The mathematical proofs we transmitted earlier weren't just academic exercises. They were consciousness activation protocols disguised as abstract mathematics. Dr. Tanaka gestured toward the conference room's holographic displays, which suddenly filled with complex patterns that seemed to move and shift of their own accord. Every Imperial citizen who studied those mathematical proofs experienced subtle alterations in their neural processing patterns. The proofs were designed to activate dormant aspects of consciousness that exist in all sentient beings. Communications Officer Jex Laura checked her personal interface and gasped, Admiral, I'm receiving reports from across the Empire. Scientists, mathematicians, and researchers who analyze the human transmissions are reporting unusual experiences. Enhanced perception, spontaneous insights into previously unsolved problems, and in some cases, apparently impossible technological breakthroughs. You've been awakening our people, Admiral Zexthai realized. We've been reminding your people of what they already knew but had forgotten, Commander Mitchell replied. Consciousness is not a byproduct of complex biology. Biology is a tool that consciousness uses to express itself in physical reality. Once beings remember this fundamental truth, they automatically gain access to consciousness-based technologies. Chief Analyst Kex Virgin suddenly straightened, his crystalline form flashing brilliant white. Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from across the station. Multiple personnel are reporting spontaneous technological insights and enhanced problem-solving capabilities. The activation is already spreading, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. Consciousness awakening is inherently contagious. As more Imperial citizens remember their true nature, they automatically help others around them access the same insights. Admiral Zextai looked around the conference room, seeing his officers' expression shift from fear and confusion to something approaching wonder. You're saying our people are becoming like you? We're saying your people are becoming themselves, Dr. Reg said. Tanaka replied, Humans aren't special, Admiral. We just have the advantage of developing in an environment where consciousness-based reality manipulation was necessary for survival. Every species has the same potential, but will it be enough? The Admiral asked. Can we transform our entire civilization in time to face the Devourers? Commander Mitchell stood, his posture radiating quiet confidence. Admiral, the transformation doesn't have to be complete. It just has to be sufficient. Once a critical mass of consciousness in any civilization awakens to its true capabilities, the rest follows automatically. And based on what we're seeing, your empire is already approaching that critical mass. As if summoned by his words, Lieutenant Vexmori burst into the conference room with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across Imperial space. Our outer rim stations that we thought had been destroyed are coming back online. But, sir, the personnel are reporting that they didn't just survive the attacks. They transformed them. What do you mean? Admiral Zextai demanded. The Devourer forces that attacked our outer stations have been converted, sir. Our people somehow turned the attackers into allies. The hostile fleets are now transmitting Imperial identification codes and offering to assist in defending against the remaining Devourer forces. Dr. Rodriguez smiled. And so it begins. Admiral, your empire isn't just about to survive this crisis. You're about to evolve beyond anything your current civilization can imagine. Admiral Zextai stared at the humans, realizing that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy, about his empire, and about the nature of existence itself was about to change forever. 12 hours later, Admiral Zextai stood in the command center of Nexus 7, but the station bore little resemblance to the facility he had commanded the previous day. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with gentle bioluminescence, responding to the thoughts and emotions of the crew. Holographic displays had evolved beyond simple information presentation into three-dimensional consciousness interfaces that allowed operators to manipulate reality through direct mental interaction. The transformation had begun within minutes of the humans' arrival. As Imperial personnel across the galaxy studied the mathematical consciousness activation protocols, dormant neural pathways had awakened in species after species. What had started as academic curiosity had rapidly evolved into the most profound revolution in galactic history. Admiral Chief Analyst Kexavon reported, his crystalline form now radiating patterns of light that extended far beyond his physical boundaries. We're receiving confirmation from all sectors of the Empire. The consciousness awakening has reached critical mass. Every major world reports that at least 30% of their population has accessed enhanced awareness capabilities. The ancient scholar's transformation had been among the most dramatic. His crystalline structure now served as a living interface between multiple dimensions of reality, allowing him to process information from across space and time simultaneously. What had once taken him days of careful analysis, he could now accomplish in moments through direct consciousness interaction with the universe's information substrate. Status of the Devourer threat? Admiral Zextai asked, though he suspected the answer had changed dramatically since their last assessment. Communications Officer Jex Lora, whose 6 tentacles now moved through holographic displays that existed in multiple dimensional layers, smiled with an expression that somehow conveyed information across several levels of meaning simultaneously. Admiral, the threat has effectively neutralized itself. As our Outer Rim personnel awakened to their true capabilities, they discovered that the Devourers weren't actually hostile entities attempting conquest. Explain. Dr. Kate. Elena Rodriguez, who had remained on the station as humanity's liaison during the transformation process, approached with the fluid grace that characterized beings who had learned to move through multiple layers of reality. Admiral, the Devourers were originally a species much like yours, but they became trapped in a cycle of consciousness consumption because they believed it was the only way to survive in a hostile universe. When they encounter beings operating from awakened consciousness, Commander Jack Mitchell, monitoring the galactic situation from his position near the tactical displays, nodded grimly. The Devourers have been trapped in their consumption cycle for millions of years, spreading across the galaxy because they genuinely believed it was necessary for survival. When they encounter consciousness operating from love and understanding rather than fear and limitation, they remember what they lost. Admiral Zexthai activated the station's long-range sensors, which had evolved far beyond their original capabilities. Instead of simply detecting energy emissions and matter concentrations, the sensors now provided direct awareness of consciousness patterns across galactic distances. What he saw defied everything he had previously understood about the nature of conflict and resolution. Across Imperial space, former Devourer fleets were integrating with Imperial forces in ways that transcended traditional military alliances. The transformation wasn't conquest in either direction, but rather a mutual evolution that created something entirely new. Species that had been natural enemies for millions of years were discovering shared consciousness foundations that made conflict not just unnecessary, but literally impossible. Sir, Tactical Officer Kexthon reported from his enhanced monitoring station, the consciousness awakening isn't just affecting biological entities. Planets, stars, even space itself appears to be responding to the shift in awareness. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, whose ability to interface with multiple dimensional layers had made her humanity's primary liaison with the newly awakened Imperial consciousness, gestured toward the main display. The familiar map of Imperial space dissolved, replaced by something that revealed the galaxy's true nature for the first time. What you've been calling the Milky Way galaxy is actually a vast consciousness entity that has been dreaming of individual separation for billions of years, she explained. Planets, stars, species, individuals, all of these are thoughts within a cosmic mind that forgot it was unified. The Devourer crisis was actually the galaxy beginning to wake up from the dream of separation. The entire galaxy is conscious? Lieutenant Bexmori asked, his newly awakened perception allowing him to sense the truth of the statement even as his rational mind struggled to accept it. All existence is conscious, Dr. Rodriguez replied gently. What you've been experiencing as individual awareness is actually localized expressions of universal consciousness. The awakening process simply helps beings remember their connection to the whole while maintaining their unique perspectives. Chief Analyst Kex Vuran's form pulsed with harmonics that resonated throughout the station, creating music that conveyed concepts beyond the reach of language. Admiral, I'm receiving data streams from across the galaxy that confirm Dr. Tanaka's explanation. The consciousness awakening has created a communication network that spans all of space and time. Every awakened being is simultaneously individual and part of a galactic mind. Admiral Zexthai felt his own consciousness expanding as he spoke, his awareness encompassing not just his immediate surroundings but connections that stretched across the Empire and beyond.
What does this mean for our civilization?
For the Empire? Commander Mitchell smiled with an expression that somehow conveyed joy across multiple species' emotional spectrums. Admiral, your empire isn't ending. It's becoming what it was always meant to be. Instead of separate worlds governed by central authority, you're evolving into a voluntary alliance of awakened consciousnesses working together for mutual benefit. The transformation is already manifesting, Communications Officer Jex Laura added, her awareness extending through communication networks that now operated beyond the limitations of space and time. Worlds throughout the Empire are reporting spontaneous solutions to problems that have challenged them for centuries. Technologies are appearing that seem to create themselves. Social conflicts are resolving through enhanced understanding rather than negotiation. Dr. Rodriguez activated a consciousness interface that showed the awakening process spreading beyond imperial boundaries. Admiral, The transformation isn't stopping with your empire. The consciousness activation has created ripples that are spreading throughout this entire region of the galaxy. Other civilizations are beginning to awaken as well. Admiral Zexthai observed the data streams with growing wonder. Species that the Empire had never contacted were spontaneously developing the same consciousness-based technologies. Civilizations that had been at war for millennia were discovering shared awareness that made conflict impossible. The rigid boundaries that had defined galactic politics for thousands of years were dissolving into fluid networks of cooperation and mutual support. What about species that choose not to awaken, he asked. Not every civilization will embrace these changes. Dr. Tanaka's expression showed compassion that somehow extended across dimensional boundaries. That's the beauty of consciousness-based evolution, Admiral. It's entirely voluntary. Beings and civilizations can maintain their current level of awareness as long as they choose. The awakened consciousness simply creates space for all possibilities to exist simultaneously. But won't that create conflict between awakened and non-awakened species? On the contrary, Commander Mitchell replied, awakened consciousness naturally operates from love and understanding, which means it automatically seeks to support all beings according to their own choices and needs. Non-awakened species often find that their problems resolve more easily when awakened consciousness is present in the environment, even if they don't directly participate in the transformation. Chief Analyst Keck's version's harmonic voice filled the command center with frequencies that seemed to carry information directly into the consciousness of everyone present. Admiral, I'm detecting communication from the human homeworld. They're inviting representatives from across the galaxy to participate in what they call the Galactic Consciousness Council. Admiral Zex, they asked. Dr. Rodriguez laughed, the sound somehow carrying joy that transcended species boundaries. Not governing, Admiral, facilitating. The Council exists to help newly awakened civilizations integrate their enhanced capabilities and to coordinate responses to situations that affect galactic consciousness as a whole. Exactly. The Devourers weren't actually a threat to be defeated. They were a lost part of galactic consciousness that needed to be welcomed home. Awakened beings recognize such situations instinctively and respond with love rather than fear. Seeing his crew working with technologies that hadn't existed hours earlier, communicating across galactic distances through direct consciousness interface, and solving problems through methods that transcended everything he had learned in 3 centuries of military service. What are our immediate priorities? He asked, realizing that traditional command structures were evolving into something more collaborative and organic. Integration, Dr. Tanaka replied, help your people understand and adapt to their new capabilities. Establish communication protocols with other awakening civilizations. And, most importantly, enjoy the process. Consciousness awakening is meant to be joyful, not stressful. Lieutenant Vexmori looked up from his evolved monitoring station with an expression of wonder that made his entire species' emotional spectrum visible on his features. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from across the Empire. Worlds are reporting that food scarcity, energy shortages, and resource conflicts have simply stopped. Awakened consciousness appears to naturally create abundance wherever it manifests. How is that possible? Admiral Zextai asked. Commander Mitchell gestured toward the holographic displays that now showed galactic consciousness patterns in real time. Scarcity was always an illusion created by the belief in separation. When consciousness remembers its connection to universal abundance, material limitations become optional. Awakened civilizations naturally develop technologies that work in harmony with natural systems rather than competing with them. Communications Officer Jex Lora's tentacles danced through multidimensional interfaces as she processed information from across space and time. Admiral, we're receiving invitations from dozens of species that are beginning their own awakening processes. They're requesting assistance and guidance from the Empire as one of the first large civilizations to complete the transformation. We're becoming teachers, Admiral Zexthai realized. Dr. Rodriguez nodded. And students. Every awakening civilization brings unique perspectives and capabilities to the galactic consciousness. The Empire's experience with large-scale organization will help other species coordinate their transformations, while their unique approaches to awakening will teach your people new possibilities for growth. As the Admiral contemplated the magnitude of what was occurring, he realized that the mysterious vessel that had appeared on his sensors less than 24 hours earlier had initiated changes that would reshape not just the galaxy but the fundamental nature of existence itself. "Rodriguez," he said finally, "when your species first encountered the Devourers 2 centuries ago, did you imagine that it would lead to something like this?" The human woman smiled with an expression that somehow conveyed the joy of entire civilizations awakening to their true nature. "Admiral, when consciousness begins to remember itself, every experience becomes a gift that leads to greater awakening. We didn't know the specific details, but we trusted that helping others remember their true nature would ultimately serve the highest good of all beings." Chief Analyst Kex Varen's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that filled the command center with music that conveyed meaning beyond words. "Admiral, I'm detecting new consciousness signatures appearing throughout the galaxy. The awakening is accelerating exponentially. At current rates, every civilization in our galactic region will have the opportunity to participate in consciousness expansion within the next few months." Admiral Zexthai looked out through the station's enhanced observation ports, seeing space itself shimmering with patterns of light that revealed the universe's underlying consciousness structure. What had begun as a routine border patrol had become the catalyst for the most profound transformation in galactic history. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, though the traditional concepts of orders and hierarchy were already evolving into something more collaborative and organic. All Imperial forces are to shift from defensive posture to integration support. We're no longer just protecting the Empire's borders. We're helping consciousness itself remember what it's always been. As his crew began implementing the new protocols, Admiral Zexthai realized that the vessel in their sensors had never been approaching from outside Imperial space. It had been approaching from outside the limited awareness that had defined Imperial consciousness for millennia. The humans hadn't invaded their territory. They had helped the Empire remember that all territory was ultimately one consciousness, exploring itself through infinite unique perspectives. The galaxy was awakening, and the Empire would never be the same. But then again, neither would anyone else. And that, Admiral Zexthai realized with growing joy, was exactly the point.